News Live Update. It's Tuesday, October 2nd, 2001, and I'm Ebony Daniels. Here's a look at what we'll be covering for you in the next few minutes. Clarion Borough Council just wrapped up here, live on TV5. Mark Despocatus will be joining us later with a wrap-up of tonight's events. We'll also let you know when you can see Saturday's Autumn Leaf Festival rebroadcast. And we'll bring you the latest info on the attacks of September 11th. All this tonight on Clarion's very own TV5 News Live. But first, moving on to some local news, the Clarion County Unemployment Report is out for the month of August. The report shows the area's unemployment is down 0.4%, unemployment in July for the county 4.2%, while the rate in August shows only a 3.8% rate of unemployment. The state and national unemployment was 4.9% for the month of August. Of course, these numbers reflect the unemployment before the terrorist attacks. Jobs lost due to those attacks will be reflected once the September numbers become available. And in response to those terrorist attacks, Clarion University is sponsoring a panel discussion. The discussion will focus on understanding terrorism and the U.S. response. Panelists will consist of professors from Clarion University's College of Arts and Sciences and the Political Science Association. The discussion will take place in Hart Chapel this coming Thursday, October 4th at 7 p.m. Admission is free and the discussion is open to the public. In state news, Auditor General Robert Casey is pushing for legislation to be passed eliminating mandatory overtime in health care facilities. Casey feels nurses who are forced to work overtime become overworked and careless. Casey plans to change educational requirements for nurses, hoping to attract more nurses. Casey wants to send a message that Pennsylvania cares about its nurses and the patients they care for. With this legislation, Casey feels all health care will benefit. Did you miss Clarion's Autumn Leaf Parade this Saturday, or do you want a tape of it? Well, this Thursday, TV5 will be rebroadcasting the Autumn Leaf Parade. The parade will broadcast in its entirety at 5:30 p.m. right here on TV5. Again, that is this Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Would you like to thank all those who helped with our production of the parade? A special thanks goes out to AT&T Broadband. Without their help, our broadcast would not have been possible. Tonight's Clarion Borough Council meeting wrapped up a few minutes, and its very own TV Live guest Mark Despocatus joins us live from the Clarion Free Library with a recap of tonight's meeting. Mark?
Thank you, Ebony. We are down here live at the Clarion Free Library with just a brief update on a recap for you of what happened tonight. Let me just tell you a few of the things that happened. Council accepted the resignation of Robert Niznik from the Clarion Area Authority. Now, his term actually doesn't expire until 2003, so they're asking any citizen of the borough to go ahead and send in a letter or call the borough office if they would be interested in working on the Clarion Area Authority. Another thing that caused a good bit of talking tonight here was the possibility of some traffic changes in the downtown area. Now, if you've been following this, you've heard that from 7th Avenue from Wood to Main Street, they were considering making that only a one-way road. Well, the Public Works Committee decided that was not going to work, so instead they brought up the idea of possibly making that a right turn only out onto Main Street. Some considerable discussion about that tonight. And then Borough Council said, let's wait another month and explore this further. Talk to some of those businesses directly affected. That's the area right there around Kentucky Fried Chicken as well as the New Bethlehem Bank. They're going to go ahead and talk to those businesses as well as other businesses that this may indeed affect. That will happen in the next month, and then we should be hearing about this again sometime next month. Also talked a little bit about skateboarding. Now, I remember covering this story a few years ago. Some people have complained about skateboarders in Clarion Borough, especially on Main Street, and there's a proposal now on the table that says that if you are found with a skateboard on Main Street and riding it where you shouldn't be, that it's possible that after your first offense, your skateboard could be confiscated for a week, that you would need, if you were over 18, you could go in a week and pick it up, and if you're under 18, a parent or guardian would indeed have to go and pick it up. And there's even a possibility that after a third offense that it could take up to 6 months to get that skateboard back. That, of course, not going to effect yet, but still a possibility. Halloween is coming up at the end of the month. Borough Council says that trick-or-treating in the borough will be Wednesday, October 31st from 6 to 8. And if you want to participate in trick-or-treating for Halloween, you are asked to leave your lights on in the borough. Also, as you know, they're moving the Public Works building, so as they're finishing cleaning out some of the things from the building, they're finding some things that they don't need, or unwanted, unused things. There may be a sale of that surplus property, and Council has approved that, and that should come hopefully sometime at the end of October. Look for a full recap of tonight's meeting tomorrow night right here on TV5 News Live. For now, reporting live from the Clarion Free Library, I'm Mark Despotakis, TV5 News. Ebony, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Moving on to national news. South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond felt sick this morning on the Senate floor as lawmakers were working on anti-terrorism legislation. Thurmond is 98 years old and has been in frail condition for several years. As Senate Republican leader Trent Lott describes it, Senator Thurmond was feeling faint. He was taken from the Senate in a wheelchair and went to a hospital as a precaution. The senator is still in the hospital, and doctors are not saying what is wrong with the elderly senator. Today, the Taliban offered to negotiate the surrender of accused terrorist leader Osama bin Laden if proof is provided of his involvement in the September 11th attacks. That offer came as the U.S. briefed Pakistan about the terror investigation. Walter Rogers has that story, as well as other developments.
Pakistan's radical Islamists doing their best to scare their government. They don't like President Musharraf's new coziness with the United States. So, how the government deals with its radical Muslims may decide whether this region slides into chaos. Anti-American, anti-government protests like this are illegal, but the authorities tolerate them as a kind of safety valve. Pakistan's president shrugs off his Islamic dissidents.
I think I have the support of the entire people of Pakistan. It's only the religious extremists, as I said, who have these extreme views.
Musharraf, a general, has crafted a shrewd political alliance with more moderate Islamic clerics, intellectuals, and journalists, warning them Pakistan would have been branded a terrorist state unless it joined the American-led coalition. He conjured up the threat of enemies lurking: India, Israel, and the United States ganging up on Pakistan.
If we stay with the Taliban, then our enemy, India, will be a frontline state, not only against Taliban and Afghanistan, but also against Pakistan. How do we defend ourselves realistically if the entire world comes on the side of India and we become the target?
Taking no chances, the Pakistani government also imposed tight security against potential troublemakers from Afghanistan. There is a virtual zero tolerance for protest in the capital. Witness these arrests of some rather tame demonstrators over the weekend. The problem is that Pakistan's streets, tame one minute, can become violent the next, especially if the United States were to strike Muslim Afghanistan next door. If America kills Muslims, this Pakistani said, then all these people will become Osama bin Ladens. Most Pakistanis, however, say one enemy at a time is enough.
They also are conscious of the pros and cons and the bottom line of a balance sheet of being with Americans and being against Americans.
There are also clear benefits to Pakistan from this crisis. Economic sanctions imposed after its nuclear tests have been lifted. New economic aid could be forthcoming. And India's efforts to blacklist Pakistan as a sponsor of terrorism have fizzled out. So abandoning the Taliban radicals across the border was an easy choice.
A government that has been supported by religious political parties in Afghanistan is on its way out. America is assembling massive power in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, and ready to strike.
Still, the checkerboard of South Asian politics depends now on U.S. military strikes against Afghanistan. How many bombs, How much devastation? How many people die? That is the variable which makes the end game here still uncertain. Walter Rogers, CNN, Islamabad.
Russia has signed a new agreement to supply weapons to Iran. Such an agreement would have drawn harsh U.S. criticism before September 11th, but now a new political landscape seems to have taken shape. Jill Daugherty reports from Moscow.
Just a month ago, it would have seemed impossible. In Moscow, the defense minister of Iran, a country the United States accuses of sponsoring terrorism, speaking out in support of U.S. military action against terrorist bases in Afghanistan.
If such action is supported by the international community and the United Nations, then we naturally will support it.
But Russia shares similar. Both support Afghanistan Northern Alliance, which is Moscow says terrorist camps in Afghanistan are training rebels to fight in Russia's own breakaway Republic of Chechnya. Tuesday, a senior Russian presidential aide named some of those bases and claimed the training is paid for by accusers of masterminding terrorist attacks in the United States.
There is more than ample proof that the same people who sent the kamikazes to attack Washington and New York are the same people who, even before that, trained others in Chechnya in the same kind of methods.
The Iranian defense minister's visit to Moscow could have been awkward for Russia. The two countries signing an agreement on Russian weapons supplies to Iran. At the same time, Moscow is pledging its full support to the West in the fight against terrorism. But Iran, Russia maintains, is no rogue state.
It's a country on its road. It's still with problems, but it is on our side. It's one of us. That's why we should equip it with whatever it needs to protect it.
Russia claims the weapons it's selling to Iran are proof that none of the sales violate international agreements. Russia's deal with Iran presents a diplomatic challenge for the United States. Iran is speaking out against terrorism, something the U.S. welcomes. But Washington continues to be suspicious of Iran, and Russian arms sales only make that worse. Jill Daugherty, CNN, Moscow.
On Monday, Indian Defense Minister Jaswant Singh told President Bush that his country believes with absolute certainty that Osama bin Laden was behind the September 11th terrorist attacks. India has linked bin Laden's Al-Qaeda group with militant groups such as who launch attacks on India. The meeting comes on the heels of an attack against India this week. As Satinder Bindra reports from the New Delhi, India wants to help the U.S. in its war against terrorism, but the country has its own war to fight.
One day after more than 35 people were killed in a suicide attack against the provincial parliament on the Indian side of Kashmir, India blames its neighbor Pakistan. Bombings occur regularly in the disputed region of Kashmir, where militants have for over a decade been fighting India for independence. But the scale of this attack, directed against the heart of Indian democracy in the region, has outraged New Delhi.
We're tired. We've had enough bloodshed. We cannot take attacks like this made against our soil. We cannot take everyday presentations of death and destruction.
India is now warning Pakistan its patience is running out. Many here are incensed. A Pakistan-based militant group, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, has claimed responsibility for this attack. In a statement given to CNN, the Jaish-e-Mohammed says the bomber who smashed an explosive-laden car against these parliament gates was from Pakistan. Later, the Jaish-e-Mohammed from Islamabad denied any involvement. India, though, insists the group did bomb the assembly. The suicide bomber and 9 security guards and civilians were killed instantly. Others bled to death because onlookers worried about a follow-up blast were scared to help. In the confusion, 2 other militants dressed as police officers slipped inside the legislature, where they engaged security forces in a firefight for several hours before police say they were shot dead. The Pakistani government has condemned this attack, but India says its neighbor must back its words with deeds. India says it wants Pakistan to stop training militants in what it alleges are training camps spread across Pakistan. Islamabad denies arming and training the militants, who it describes as freedom fighters, but in the past it's admitted giving them moral, diplomatic and political support.
And let's not forget, we now have a Chapter 7 resolution of the United Nations Security Council that does not even allow tacit support, be it political, emotional, moral or whatever, to terrorist groups. So what Pakistan is doing is now going against the very grain of the United Nations Security Council.
India says groups such as the Jaish-e-Mohammed threaten not just India, but the US as well.
We have absolutely no doubt in our minds that the group that was responsible is hand in glove with the Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden.
India wants such groups banned, but so far the US has declared only one group fighting in Kashmir, the Harkat al-Mujahideen, a terrorist organization. In a letter written to President Bush, the Indian Prime Minister reminds Washington he's standing by the US in its fight against terrorism. Now, as Indian lives are lost in a suicide attack, New Delhi wants Washington to understand its grief and realize if such attacks continue, India too will act to protect its national interests. Satinder Bindra, CNN, New Delhi.
Ever since the September 11th terrorist attacks, England has stood side by side with the United States in its decision to retaliate. On Tuesday, British Prime Minister Tony Blair gave his country a pep talk on the need for nations to work together in the war against terrorism. And he warned Afghanistan's ruling Taliban military to hand over suspected terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden and his followers or face military strikes. Margaret Lowry was in London for Blair's emotional speech.
Just a choice. Defeat it or be defeated by it. And defeat it we must.
From the Prime Minister's own words and those of British newspaper headline writers, it would appear the U.S. war on terrorism has been claimed by Britain as its own battle.
The aim will be to eliminate their military hardware, cut off their finances, disrupt their supplies, target their troops, not civilians.
Prime Minister Tony Blair seen not just standing shoulder to shoulder with U.S. President George W. Bush, but helping to lead the charge himself. But analysts say, don't mistake him for a political hawk. Rather, he acts out of moral conviction.
Tony Blair is probably the preeminent conviction politician amongst NATO leaders, which is to say everyone knows that he has a Clintonian pragmatic streak, but he also carries great credibility in European capitals as someone who stands up for what he believes.
And fighting this, analysts say, is something Tony Blair believes in. In the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, Prime Minister Blair and his wife flew to the States to make clear their support, a gesture welcomed by President Bush.
Thank you for coming, friend.
Friend, indeed. Britain may belong to the European Union, but historically it is seen as having a special relationship with the U.S. Analysts say both sides benefit.
There is the risk that he will be viewed as a lapdog of Washington, but he also has the objective of trying to strengthen Britain's role as a bridge between the European Union and the United States. And that is a role which gives Britain and Tony Blair a lot of leverage within the European Union.
We continue the air campaign. We do not rule out any options.
Leverage with Washington as well. In Kosovo, Britain believed influential in helping then-President Clinton change his mind about ground troops. This time, analysts say, Britain expects to have a role in any negotiations over a regime to replace the Taliban, should that come to pass. And a seat at the table when allies define and execute other strategic aspects what will likely be a wide-ranging and lengthy war against terror. Margaret Lowry, CNN, London.
Well, that's all for TV5 News. Join us tomorrow with Carrie LePew and Jackie Nealing. I'm Ebony Daniels. Good night.